The stepmother's hand struck Emily Carter hard across the face, and the 10-year-old girl tumbled out of the wagon and hit the dusty Arizona road with a cry she swallowed before it could escape. Her palms tore open on the stones. Her knees bled. She looked up just in time to see the wagon wheels turning away, spitting grit into her eyes, and her stepmother's voice cut through the heat like a whip. "Don't you dare follow, girl! Don't you dare!" And then the wagon was gone. Now, before this story goes another mile, I want you to do one small thing for me. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and settle in with a warm cup of something, because what happens next is going to stay with you long after the last word is read. And while you're down there in the comments, tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I want to see just how far little Emily's story has traveled from your porch to mine. Now, let me take you back to that empty road and the child kneeling in the dust. Emily did not cry. She pressed one small bleeding hand against her chest, where something square and hard was hidden beneath the torn gray cotton of her dress, and she listened to the wagon until the sound of it was swallowed up by the wind and the heat, and nothing. Her lip was split. She could taste copper. She spat once into the dirt the way she'd seen her father do when he was angry, and she whispered to the empty road, "You ain't killed me yet, Eleanor." Her stepmother's name, spoken out loud to the sky, felt like a small act of war. Emily sat back on her heels and took stock the way her father had taught her. One hand torn, other hand scraped, knees bleeding but not bad. Dress ripped at the shoulder where Eleanor had grabbed her. Shoes, Eleanor had taken the shoes. Of course she had. A girl walking barefoot across Arizona in July would not last the afternoon, and Eleanor Carter was nothing if not practical about the matter of killing children. The notebook was still there. That was what mattered. Emily pressed her palm flat against the small bulge beneath her dress and closed her eyes, and she could almost hear her father's voice again, the way it had sounded the last night he was alive. "Emmy, listen to me." "I'm listening, Papa." "If anything ever happens to me, and I mean anything, girl, you do not go to your stepmother. You hear me? I hear you. You don't go to the sheriff. You don't go to Mr. Halston down at the bank. You don't trust a soul in this whole county. Then who do I go to, Papa? There's a man, Jack Turner, runs cattle on the old Holloway place other side of Red Rock. 20 miles as the crow flies." 20 miles is awful far, Papa." "I know it, baby, I know. But you listen. Jack Turner owes me a debt he can't never pay back, and he's a man who honors his debts, even the ones nobody's asking him to. You get to Jack Turner, you tell him you're Samuel Carter's girl, and you give him this book. You hear me? Nobody else. Just Jack." "Yes, Papa." "Say it back. Jack Turner, old Holloway place, other side of Red Rock. Good girl, my good girl." That had been 3 months ago. Her father had been dead 2 weeks later, thrown from a horse he'd raised from a colt, a horse that had never thrown a rider in its life. Eleanor had worn black at the funeral and wept into a lace handkerchief, and the whole town had called her brave, and Emily had stood beside the coffin and said nothing at all because she had been 10 years old and she had known better than to speak. Now Emily opened her eyes. The sun was already climbing. She figured it to be 9 in the morning, maybe 10. She figured the road Eleanor had left her on to be the old freight trail that ran south out of Prescott, which meant Red Rock was west and Jack Turner was further west still, and 20 miles on bare feet in July was the kind of arithmetic a grown man would refuse. Emily stood up. "All right then," she said to nobody. "All right." She started walking. The first mile, she counted her steps. The second mile, she stopped counting because counting was slowing her down. By the time the sun was directly overhead, her feet had stopped bleeding only because the dust had caked into the wounds and sealed them shut, and her tongue felt like a piece of leather in her mouth, and she had learned that if she thought about water, she would cry, so she did not think about water. She thought about her father's voice instead. "You're tougher than you look, Emmy." "Am I, Papa?" "Tougher than most men I've rode with. You just don't know it yet." Around noon, a rider came up the road behind her. Emily heard the hooves before she saw the horse, and every lesson her father had ever taught her lit up in her head at once. She threw herself off the trail into a stand of mesquite and flattened herself against the hot earth and did not breathe. The rider came on at a walk. A tall man in a dark coat riding a good bay horse, the kind of horse a town man owned, not a cowboy. He stopped not 50 feet from where Emily lay. He turned in the saddle. He looked up the road, then down it. "Girl," he called. "Little girl, come on out now. Your mama sent me to fetch you." Emily did not move. She did not blink. She watched an ant crawl across the back of her wrist, and she did not so much as twitch. "Emily Carter," the man called. "Ain't no sense hiding, sweetheart. I got water. Got your shoes too. Mama feels awful bad about the misunderstanding." Emily's jaw set so hard her teeth ached. The man rode the line of the road for another 10 minutes, calling her name in that syrup-sweet voice that grown men used when they wanted to steal something from a child. Emily lay in the mesquite, and she memorized every inch of him. The scar along his jawline, the silver band on his left hand, the rifle butt sticking up from the saddle scabbard. She memorized him the way her father had taught her to memorize the men who came to see him at the ranch in the last months of his life, the men who'd made him close the door and lower his voice, and finally sit down at the desk and begin writing things down in a small leather book. The rider cursed under his breath. Then he turned his horse and loped back up the road the way he had come, and Emily did not move for a full 10 minutes after the sound of him was gone. When she finally stood up, she was shaking, not from fear, from rage. "He lied," she whispered. "He lied and said mama. She ain't my mama. She never was my mama." She picked a prickly pear pad off the mesquite with the hem of her dress wrapped around her hand, and she bit into it and sucked the bitter wet pulp and spit out the needles. It wasn't water, but it wasn't nothing. She walked. By 3 in the afternoon, she had passed the fork that led to Red Rock. She did not take it. A town meant people, and people meant the man in the dark coat, and the man in the dark coat meant Eleanor, and Eleanor meant death. Emily kept west. By 5 in the afternoon, she fell for the first time. She got up. By 6 in the afternoon, she fell for the second time, and she did not get up right away, and she lay on her side in the hot dust, and she spoke to her father as if he were sitting on a rock beside her. "Papa, Papa, I can't feel my feet no more." "Yes, you can, baby." "I can't, Papa." "Emmy, look at me. Look at me, girl. What did I tell you about quittin'? You said quittin's a choice same as walkin'." "That's right. That's exactly right. So which one you choosin'?" Emily sat up. She wiped her face with the back of her bleeding hand. She stood. "I'm choosin' walkin', Papa." "Good girl." The sun was low in the sky when she first saw the fence line. She did not know what she was seeing at first. A thin dark thread stretched across the red earth neat as a seam, and then her mind caught up with her eyes, and she understood that a fence meant a ranch, and a ranch meant a man, and she began to run. She fell twice more before she reached the gate. The gate was wooden bleached silver by the sun, with a brand burned into the crossbar that Emily had never seen before. A letter T sitting inside a circle. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she lifted the iron latch with both hands, and she let the gate swing open on its hinges, and she walked through it onto the property of Jack Turner. The house was a quarter-mile off a low adobe with a tin roof and a wide porch. And there was a man on the porch, and the man on the porch stood up when he saw her. He did not come to her. He stood very still, one hand on a porch post, and he watched her come. Emily walked the last quarter-mile like a soldier at the end of a war. One foot, then the other. She did not fall. She would not fall. Not now, not in front of him. She reached the bottom step of the porch, and she looked up at the man standing above her, and she could not make her voice work on the first try. She swallowed. She tried again. "Are you Mr. Jack Turner?" The man's jaw tightened. His eyes, gray, set deep under a dark brow, moved over her slowly. Her feet, her knees, the torn shoulder of her dress, the split lip, the dust caked in her hair. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I am." Emily almost laughed when he called her ma'am. Almost. She did not have the strength. I'm Samuel Carter's girl, she said. I'm Emily. The man on the porch did not move. But something in his face changed, something deep and tight, like a man who had just been struck hard in the chest and was doing everything he could not to show it. Samuel Carter. Yes, sir. Out of Prescott. Yes, sir. Where's your daddy child? Emily looked at him, and she did not blink. Dead, Mr. Turner. 3 months now. Jack Turner closed his eyes. He kept them closed for a long moment. When he opened them again, he did not speak. He came down the steps one at a time, and he knelt in the dust in front of her, and Emily saw that he was a tall man, taller than her father had been, with dark hair just starting to gray at the temples, and a face that had not been shaved in 2 or 3 days. His hands, when he raised them, were the hands of a man who worked for his living. Miss Carter, he said quietly, you got anyone with you? No, sir. Anyone follow you? A man in a dark coat, bay horse, silver ring on his left hand, scar on his jaw right about here. She touched her own jaw. He stopped up on the freight road around noon, called out for me. I hid. He rode off. Jack Turner's eyes sharpened. You memorized him. Papa taught me. How far'd you walk, Miss Carter? 20 miles, sir, give or take. Eleanor dropped me off on the freight road this morning. Eleanor. My stepmother. Jack Turner made a sound in the back of his throat that Emily could not name. It was not a word. It was not a curse. It was the sound a man made when something he had been afraid of for a long time finally walked up to his porch in broad daylight. Miss Carter, he said, I need you to do something for me. Yes, sir. I need you to come up on this porch and sit down in that chair, and I'm going to fetch you water. Then I'm going to tend to your feet. Then we're going to talk. Can you do that? Yes, sir, I can. Can you walk up them steps? Yes, sir. She tried. She made it to the second step, and her knee gave out from under her, and Jack Turner caught her under the arms before she hit the wood. She expected him to pick her up. He did not. He set her back on her feet, and he held her steady with one hand on her shoulder, and he looked her in the eye. Reckon you been carried enough today, Miss Carter? You want to walk, you walk. I'll just stand here in case you slip. Something in Emily's chest broke open at that. She did not cry. She was too tired to cry. But something broke open all the same. Yes, sir. She walked up the steps. He stood behind her the whole way, one step below his hand hovering, but not touching. She made it to the chair. She sat down. She breathed. Jack Turner went inside and came back with a tin cup of water, and he handed it to her without a word, and she drank it in 4 swallows. He brought her another. She drank half of that one, and then made herself stop, because her father had told her once that a man who drank too much water too fast after a dry day would be sick for a week, and she could not afford to be sick. Slow down's right, Jack said, watching her. You a smart girl, Miss Carter. I try to be, sir. He pulled up a second chair and sat down across from her, and he pulled off his hat and set it on his knee, and Emily saw that his hair was wet at the hairline with sweat that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. Miss Carter, he said, I want you to tell me exactly what happened this morning. Eleanor woke me before dawn, said we were going to Prescott to buy a new dress. I knew she was lying. How'd you know? She never bought me a dress in her life, Mr. Turner, and this morning she was smiling. Eleanor don't smile, not at me. Jack's mouth moved in something that was almost not quite a smile of his own. Go on. She drove us north instead of south. I didn't say nothing. I just watched the road. About 10 miles out, she stopped the wagon and said, Get down. I said no. She hit me. I fell. She drove off. Emily paused. She took my shoes before she left, sir. Pulled 'em right off my feet while I was laying in the dirt. She took your shoes? Yes, sir. Jack Turner's hands resting on his knees slowly closed into fists. He did not seem to notice. Miss Carter, did your daddy ever say my name to you? Yes, sir. What did he say? Emily reached under the torn collar of her dress. Her fingers found the leather cord around her neck, and she followed it down, and she drew out the small flat notebook that had hung against her heart for 3 months and 20 miles of desert. She held it in both hands. She looked at the man across from her. He said you owed him a debt you couldn't never pay back, Mr. Turner. He said you was a man who honored his debts. He said if anything ever happened to him, I was to bring you this. She held out the notebook. Jack Turner did not take it. He looked at the little leather book, and he looked at the child holding it, and Emily saw him for just one moment look like a man who was about to be sick. He put one hand over his mouth. He took it away. Miss Carter, he said, and his voice had gone hoarse. Do you know what's in that book? Some of it, sir. Papa let me read some. He taught me his code. What's in it? Names, dates, a bank in Phoenix, a lawyer named Halston, 3 men who died before my papa did, and the way each one of them died. Her small voice did not shake. And the name of the man who paid Eleanor to marry my papa. Jack Turner closed his eyes again. When he opened them, they were wet. He did not let the wet fall. He reached out with both hands, and he took the notebook from her, and he held it like a thing that could break. Emily, he said, and it was the first time he had used her given name. Do you have any idea what you just walked across a desert to hand me? Yes, sir. Tell me. She looked at him square, and the late sun caught in her chestnut hair, and her split lip moved around the words like they cost her something. I walked across a desert, Mr. Turner, to hand you the rope that's gonna hang 'em all. Somewhere out past the gate, in the direction of the freight road, a second rider was coming up the trail at a hard gallop, and neither Jack Turner nor Emily Carter could hear him yet, but the dust of his coming was already rising into the Arizona sky. Jack Turner heard the hoofbeats before Emily did. His head came up the way a coyote's comes up at the crack of a twig, and he was on his feet before the sound had fully registered. Emily. Yes, sir. Get inside. Sir. Now, child, through that door down the hall, last room on the left. There's a root cellar under the rug. You lift the ring and you climb down, and you do not make one sound, you hear me. Emily was already moving. 20 miles of desert had taught her that when a man like Jack Turner said now, you did not argue. Take the book, she said over her shoulder. No, ma'am, you take it. You keep it on you. You do not let it out of your hands for any reason. You understand me? Yes, sir. Go. She went. The door slapped shut behind her, and Jack Turner stood alone on his porch and watched the dust come up the road, and his right hand drifted down to the handle of the pistol on his hip without him appearing to notice it had. The rider pulled up short of the porch at a hard walk, the horse lathered along the neck and chest. It was not the man in the dark coat. It was a younger man, sandy-haired, maybe 25, in a sweat-stained shirt, and a deputy's tin badge pinned crooked on his vest. Mr. Turner. Deputy. Afternoon, sir. Riley. Deputy Riley out of Prescott. I know who you are, son. Your daddy ran cattle with me in '81. What brings you out my way? Looking for a little girl, sir. 10 years old, chestnut hair. Answers to Emily Carter. Gone missing this morning out of her mama's wagon on the freight road. Jack Turner did not move. Missin'? Yes, sir. Mrs. Carter come into town around noon in a state. Said the girl jumped out of the wagon at a stop and ran off into the brush. Said she hollered for her for 2 hours and couldn't raise her. Said the girl's been troubled since her daddy passed. That's so. Yes, sir. Sheriff's got men out on every road south of Prescott. I drew the west line. Was told to ride every ranch between the freight road and the Verde, and I'm riding 'em. Uh-huh. You seen her, Mr. Turner? Jack Turner took his time. He reached up and scratched the back of his neck. He looked out past the deputy at the horizon where the sun was starting to drop red into the ridgeline, and he spoke the way a man speaks when he has decided in advance exactly how much he is willing to say. Deputy Riley. Sir. How well you know Eleanor Carter? The deputy blinked. Sir. Simple question, son. How well do you know her? I don't rightly know her at all, Mr. Turner. Seen her in town a time or two. Sheriff says she's a fine woman. Church-goin'. Church-goin'. Yes, sir. Deputy, I want you to answer me one more question, and I want you to answer it honest. When Mrs. Carter come in hollerin' this afternoon, was her dress tore? Sir. Her dress, her sleeves, her hem. Was any of it tore like a woman who'd been chasing a child through brush for 2 hours? The deputy's mouth opened and closed. No, sir, it weren't. Her boots muddy. No, sir. Her hair come loose from her pins. A long pause. No, sir, it weren't. Huh. Mr. Turner, deputy, you ride back to Prescott and you tell the sheriff that Jack Turner ain't seen hide nor hair of any little girl. You tell him I'll keep an eye out on my range. And you tell him, and this part matters, son. So you listen, you tell him that if that child turns up on my land dead or alive, the first wire I send is going to be to the United States Marshal's office in Phoenix, not to his desk. You understand me? The deputy went very still in his saddle. Sir? You understand me, Riley? Yes, sir, I understand. Your daddy was a good man. You favor him. Don't let this badge make you into something he wouldn't recognize. The deputy swallowed. He touched the brim of his hat. No, sir, I won't. Ride safe, son. Sir. The deputy turned his horse. He hesitated one moment longer, one moment in which Jack Turner saw the young man's eyes flick toward the porch, toward the closed door, toward the windows, and then he touched his heels to the bay and rode back down the drive at an easier pace than he had come up it. Jack Turner stood on his porch until the rider was a dot, and then a line of dust, and then nothing. Then he went inside. Emily. Silence. Emily Carter. Deputy's gone. You can come up now, ma'am. A small scuffling sound from the back of the house. A moment later, the door at the end of the hall creaked open, and Emily stood there with one hand still on the iron ring of the cellar trapdoor, and the other pressed flat against the notebook beneath her dress. He was a lawman. He was. You lied to him, Mr. Turner. I did. Why? Jack Turner gestured her back to the kitchen. She came. He pulled out a chair for her, and she sat, and he set a plate in front of her. Cornbread, a piece of cold ham, a boiled egg, and he did not answer her until she had eaten 3 bites, because a question asked of a starving child was a question asked of half a mind. Miss Carter? Yes, sir. When your daddy and me rode together back before you was born, we learned something about the law. What did you learn? We learned that the law is a good thing when it's pointed the right direction, and we learned it is the worst thing God ever let walk this earth when it's pointed the wrong one. Emily chewed slowly. Eleanor's got it pointed the wrong direction. She does. How? I don't know yet, child, but I aim to find out. Emily swallowed. She set down the piece of cornbread. Mr. Turner. Ma'am. The lawyer in my papa's book, Halston. What about him? He's the one paying the sheriff. Jack Turner set down his own plate. Say that again, Miss Carter. Halston's the one paying the sheriff. Papa wrote it down. October of last year. He seen the sheriff come out of Halston's office with an envelope, and he followed the sheriff to the bank, and he waited, and then he went in and asked the teller what had been deposited, and the teller told him. $200 cash. Papa wrote it in the book. I read it. You read it. Papa taught me his code, sir. He said it was a game. I didn't know it wasn't a game till after. Jack Turner put his hand over his face, and he held it there a long moment. When he took it away, his eyes were dry, but something had gone hard in them that had not been there before. Miss Carter, I need you to understand something, and I need you to understand it plain. Yes, sir. You did not walk 20 miles across the Arizona desert today to hide. You understand me? You walked 20 miles across the Arizona desert to fight. And if you and me are going to fight these people, we are going to fight them the way your daddy would have wanted to fight them. Careful, smart, with the right allies, not with pistols and not with fool errands. You understand? Yes, sir. Which means I need you to do something that's going to be harder than walking that desert. What, sir? I need you to stay hid for a little while. 3 days, maybe 4. I need you to stay inside this house, and I need you to not show your face at that window. And I need you to let me do some riding and some wiring and some quiet asking around. Can you do that? Emily looked at him. She was 10 years old, and she had not slept in 36 hours, and her feet were wrapped in rags, and her lip was still bleeding at the split, and she looked at Jack Turner the way a grown woman looks at a man she is about to trust with her life. "Mr. Turner." "Ma'am." "Why'd you owe my papa a debt?" Jack Turner had not expected that question. She saw him pull back from it the way a man pulls back from a hot stove. "That ain't something you need to know right now, Miss Carter." "I reckon it is, sir. I reckon if I'm going to trust you with my life, I ought to know what my papa trusted you with first." For a long moment, Jack Turner did not speak. He looked at the girl across his kitchen table. He looked at the cornbread she had not finished. He looked at his own hands. "Your daddy saved my boy's life." Emily went very still. "Sir, I had a boy. Caleb, he was 4, 87. We was working a herd up outside Flagstaff, and there was a flash flood come down out of a dry wash, and I had him on the saddle in front of me, and the water took us both. Mr. Turner, your daddy come in after us. He had no cause to. He couldn't swim good. But he come in, and he got Caleb up on a log, and he got me up on a rock, and by the time he got himself out, he had took a kick to the chest from my horse that laid him up for 2 months. Jack Turner's voice was very level. "I sat by his bed every day of them 2 months. And when he finally opened his eyes, he said to me, 'Jack, you don't owe me nothing.' And I said to him, 'Sam, I owe you my boy.' And he said to me, 'Then, raise that boy right and we're square.' Where's Caleb now, Mr. Turner?" Jack Turner looked at her, and his mouth moved and nothing came out. He tried again. "Buried, ma'am. Winter of 91. Fever come through the valley." "Oh. So your daddy saved my boy's life, and my boy died anyway, and I've been telling myself for 5 years that meant the debt died with him. And then you come walking up my drive today, and I seen that notebook in your hand, and I understood something." "What, sir?" "The debt weren't to Caleb. The debt were to your daddy, and your daddy's girl just walked across a desert to collect." Emily's eyes filled finally for the first time since Eleanor's hand had struck her across the face that morning. She did not let the tears fall. She wiped them with the back of her wrist, and she sat up straighter in the chair. "Then I'll stay hid, Mr. Turner. I'll stay hid as long as you need." "Good girl, my good girl." He said it the way her father had said it, and he did not seem to know that he had said it, and Emily pressed her hand flat against the notebook under her dress, and she did not tell him. Jack Turner stood up. He went to the wall where a leather gun belt hung on a peg, and he took it down, and he buckled it on over his work shirt, and Emily watched him. "You going somewhere, sir?" "I'm riding out tonight." "Tonight. Tonight. Deputy Riley is a good boy, but he answers to a bought sheriff, and I do not trust that he'll sit on what he's seen here. I need to get ahead of it." "Where you riding?" 20 miles south. There's a man in Camp Verde named Thomas Beck. Used to be a federal prosecutor. Retired last spring. Your daddy did him a kindness once, too. I aim to collect on that one also." "Mr. Turner." "Ma'am." "What if they come while you're gone?" Jack Turner stopped with his hand on the gun belt buckle. He looked at her. He came back across the kitchen, and he knelt down beside her chair, the way he had knelt in the dust at the foot of his porch steps an hour earlier. "Emily, look at me." "Yes, sir." "I got a neighbor. Her name is Mrs. Hattie Doyle. She's a widow woman, lives 3 miles east. She is about the meanest 60-year-old woman God ever put on this earth, and she owes me something like what I owed your daddy, and she keeps a 10-gauge loaded with buckshot by her front door. Sir, I am going to ride you over there tonight. You are going to sleep in her spare room, and if any man, Emily including a man in a badge, rides up that woman's drive without her leave, that man is going to learn something he don't want to know about widows with shotguns. You hear me?" Emily almost smiled. It was the first almost smile of the whole day. "Yes, sir." "Good. Mr. Turner." "Ma'am, can I ask you one more thing?" "You can ask me anything, Miss Carter." "The man in the dark coat, the one on the freight road. You know who he is, don't you, sir?" Jack Turner's face did not move, but his hand on the handle of the gun belt tightened. "Emily." "Sir." "Describe him to me one more time. Slow, tall, Dark coat, good wool like a town coat. Rode a bay gelding 15 hands, maybe good horse. Scar along his jawline right side from about here to about here. Silver band on his left ring finger. Rifle in a scabbard under his right knee. Spoke like he was from back east, maybe Missouri, maybe further. His voice. Sir. His voice, child. What did it sound like? Sweet, sir, like he was trying to sound sweet. But underneath the sweet it was flat, like he didn't mean none of it. Jack Turner stood up very slowly. Emily? Yes, sir. The man who rode up on you today ain't nobody the sheriff sent. And he ain't nobody Eleanor hired on this mornin'. That man's been workin' out of Phoenix for 15 years, and he's got another name besides whatever one he told you, and he has killed that I know of personal 4 men. 2 of them were witnesses in a federal case. Emily's hand went to her chest again to the notebook. He's the one that killed my papa. I don't know that, child. You don't have to know it. I know it. Emily. I know it, Mr. Turner. I knew it the second I heard him callin' my name on that road. My papa never got thrown by that horse. My papa was put under that horse by a man, and that's the man, and Eleanor paid him, and Halston paid Eleanor, and the sheriff is taking money from Halston, and all of it is in my book. She said it plain. She said it flat. She said it the way a child says a multiplication table she has been made to memorize, until it is as true to her as her own name. Jack Turner stood looking down at her, and for one long moment his face broke. Really broke, the way a dam breaks all at once, and then he put it back together again, because the child in front of him needed him to have it together. Emily Carter. Sir. You are your father's daughter. I know, sir. Get your notebook. Get the last of that cornbread. We are riding to Mrs. Doyle's inside the hour. Emily stood up. Her legs shook. She did not let them fold. Yes, sir. She walked to the door one ragged step at a time, and Jack Turner watched her go, and he put one hand flat against the kitchen wall to steady himself, and he did not let her see it. Out beyond the porch, the sun had gone behind the ridge, and the first cold of the desert night was beginning to come down across the Turner place, and somewhere in Prescott in Phoenix, in a small office above a bank, a man with a silver band on his left hand was sitting down at a desk and drawing a line on a map, and the line ended at Jack Turner's gate. Mrs. Hattie Doyle opened her front door with a 10-gauge shotgun, resting easy in the crook of her left arm, and she looked at Jack Turner, and she looked at the child behind him, and she did not say hello. Jack. Hattie. That's Sam Carter's girl. It is. Sam Carter's dead, Jack. I know it. Then what's his girl doing on my porch at 9 o'clock at night with her feet wrapped in rags? Her stepmother dropped her on the freight road this morning. Mrs. Doyle's mouth made a small, hard line. She shifted the shotgun to her other arm. She looked down at Emily. Child. Yes, ma'am. You hungry? I ate a little, ma'am. A little ain't an answer. You hungry? Yes, ma'am. Come in. Jack, you come in too. Wipe your boots. They came in. Mrs. Doyle set the shotgun by the door, but she did not set it far. She sat Emily down at a scrubbed pine table, and she put a bowl of stew in front of her without asking what she wanted, and she stood with her arms crossed and watched the girl eat for a full minute before she spoke again. Jack. Hattie. Who's hunting her? A man out of Phoenix, silver band on his left hand, scar along his jaw. Mrs. Doyle's face did not change, but her hand drifted back toward the shotgun without her appearing to command it. That man. That man. Jack, I killed that man's brother in '84. Jack Turner almost smiled. It was not a happy smile. I know it, Hattie. Why do you think I brought her here? Huh. Mrs. Doyle looked down at Emily. Emily had stopped eating. She was looking up at the old woman with the kind of clear, steady attention that grown men paid to judges. Child. What's your name? Emily Carter, ma'am. Emily, you listen to me. In this house, you do not go near a window. You do not go out on the porch. You do not answer the door. If a man knocks, you come find me, and you come find me quiet. You understand? Yes, ma'am. If I tell you to get in the root cellar, you get in the root cellar, and you do not come out till I come get you. Not if you hear shootin', not if you hear hollerin', not if you hear me fall. You understand? Yes, ma'am. Good girl. Mrs. Doyle looked at Jack. How long you ridin', Jack? 3 days. 4 at most. Where? Camp Verde tonight. Prescott after. Phoenix if I have to. You tellin' the marshal? I'm tellin' Tom Beck. Mrs. Doyle nodded slowly. Tom Beck's a good man. He is? He'll wire the marshal. I reckon he will. Good. Now you get on. The sooner you ride, the sooner you're back. Jack Turner knelt down next to Emily's chair one more time. She looked at him. She did not reach for him. She did not cry. She simply looked. Miss Carter. Sir. You mind Mrs. Doyle. You do exactly what she says. Yes, sir. I will be back. Yes, sir. Say it back to me, Emily. You will be back, Mr. Turner. He stood up. He put his hat on. He looked at Mrs. Doyle, and she looked at him, and whatever passed between them in that look was older than Emily, and older than any of the men who were hunting her. And then Jack Turner walked out the door and down the porch steps and into the dark. The door closed behind him. Mrs. Doyle slid the bolt across. Then she picked up the 10-gauge, and she sat down in a rocking chair across from the front door, and she laid the shotgun across her knees, and she did not move from that chair for the rest of the night. Emily watched her. Mrs. Doyle, ma'am. Yes, child. You ain't gonna sleep. Not tonight. Why not, ma'am? Mrs. Doyle's eyes, gray and cold as a January pond, moved to the door and then back to the child at her table. Because Miss Carter, a woman who sleeps when she's got a Carter under her roof, is a woman who don't understand what a Carter is worth. Emily did not know what to say to that. She finished her stew. 2 days went by. Jack Turner did not return. On the morning of the 3rd day, Mrs. Doyle was out at the well drawing water when Emily, against every instruction she had been given, heard a horse on the road and went to the back window because she could not help it. She lifted one corner of the curtain, no more than 2 inches, and she looked. It was not Jack Turner. It was not the man with the silver band. It was a buckboard wagon driven by a woman in a black dress and a black bonnet, and the woman was Eleanor. Emily's breath stopped. Eleanor was not alone. There was a man sitting beside her on the buckboard, small, round, in a black town coat, with a leather satchel across his knees, and behind the buckboard rode 2 men in dusters, and one of them wore a tin star. Emily let the curtain fall. She walked, did not run. Her father had trained her out of running to the back door, and she opened it, and she went out low and fast across the yard to the well. Mrs. Doyle? Child, I told you to stay in. Eleanor, coming up the road, a fat man in a black coat, 2 men behind. One's wearing a badge. Mrs. Doyle set down the bucket. She set it down very carefully. Then she reached under her apron and she came up with a second pistol that Emily had not known she was carrying, and she handed it butt first to Emily Carter, and she looked the 10-year-old girl dead in the eye. You ever shot a gun, Miss Carter? Yes, ma'am. My papa taught me. Can you use this one? Yes, ma'am. You go in the root cellar. You pull the rug over the trap behind you. You do not come up for any reason unless you hear me call your name 3 times. 3 times, child. Not 1, not 2, 3. You understand? Yes, ma'am. Go. Emily went. She went down the cellar steps in the dark, and she pulled the trap shut above her, and she heard the rug slide back into place, and she sat in the black cold of the cellar, with her back against the stone wall, and Mrs. Doyle's pistol in her lap, and the notebook against her heart, and she listened. Above her, she heard Mrs. Doyle's boots cross the kitchen. She heard the front door open. She heard Mrs. Doyle's voice, and it was the voice of a woman who was not afraid of anything on this earth. That's close enough. A man's voice, oily official. Ma'am, my name is Mr. Cornelius Halston. I'm an attorney out of Phoenix, and I have with me Deputy Sheriff Briggs and... I know who you are, Halston. A pause. Mrs. Doyle, then you'll know I'm here on lawful business. We have reason to believe you are harboring a minor child who is a runaway from her lawful guardian, Mrs. Eleanor Carter, who is standing right here. I know who she is too. And we have a court order signed by Judge Morris this morning for the return of the child to her mother's custody. Stepmother. Pardon? Eleanor Carter is not that child's mother. She is that child's stepmother. And if you are going to stand on my porch and read me the law, Halston, you are going to read it correct. Mrs. Doyle, read me the order. I beg your pardon. The order, Halston. You said you got one. Read it. There was a rustling of paper. The lawyer's voice slower now. By order of the Honorable Judge Henry Morris of the Yavapai County Court, dated this 14th day of July, the minor child Emily Rose Carter, age 10, is hereby remanded to the custody of her lawful guardian. Stop. Ma'am, I said stop. Judge Morris is in Denver this week, Halston. His own sister married my own cousin, and I had supper with her Tuesday, and she told me her brother was on a train east on Monday and wouldn't be back till the 20th. So whoever signed that order, it weren't Judge Morris. Dead silence on the porch. Emily in the cellar pressed her hand over her mouth so that she would not make a sound, Eleanor's voice cutting in high and tight. Hattie Doyle, you hand that child over this instant, or I swear to God I will. You will what, Eleanor Carter? You will what? I am standing in my own doorway with a 10-gauge loaded with buckshot and a Colt on my hip, and behind me in this house is 3 more loaded long guns and a widow who buried her husband 15 years ago and has not slept soft a single night since. You tell me what you will. Deputy Briggs. Deputy Briggs, you take one more step onto this porch and I will put you in the ground, and the court that tries me will be federal because I have already wired the United States Marshal's office in Phoenix. And I have a reply in my kitchen drawer that says a deputy marshal is right in this way as we speak. Now you want to be a dead man on a widow's porch over a forged order, Briggs. That is your right as an American. But I would think on it. A long silence. The deputy's voice young and unsteady. Mr. Halston, sir. Shut up, Briggs. Sir, if what she's saying about Judge Morris is true. I said shut up. Mrs. Doyle's voice quiet now, the way a rattlesnake is quiet. Halston, you get off my porch. You put that woman back in her wagon. You ride back to Prescott, and you tell whoever sent you that Hattie Doyle has the child, and Hattie Doyle has the book, and Hattie Doyle has wired Thomas Beck in Camp Verde, and the marshal in Phoenix, and if one hair on that child's head is harmed between now and sundown tomorrow, there will be a reckoning in this county, the likes of which has not been seen since the war. Mrs. Doyle. Off my porch. Boots. A long pause, then boots retreating. A wagon creaking as it was turned. Eleanor's voice shrill, saying something Emily could not make out. Halston's voice answering low. Hooves. The sound of the party riding back down the drive. Emily sat in the dark of the cellar with the pistol in her lap, and she did not move. A long time later, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 20, she heard the trap creak open above her. Light came down. Emily Carter. Yes, ma'am. Emily Carter. Yes, ma'am. Emily Carter. Come up, child. Come up. She came up. She was shaking. Mrs. Doyle took the pistol from her hand and set it on the table, and she looked down at the girl, and she did something she had not done in 15 years. She put her arms around her. You done good, child. You done good. Mrs. Doyle, ma'am. Hush now. They forged the order. They did. They was gonna take me. They was gonna try. What if Mr. Turner don't come back? Mrs. Doyle held her out at arm's length. Her old face was hard, and her eyes were wet, and she spoke the way a woman speaks when she has been waiting her whole life to say something, and is only just now getting the chance. Child, listen to me. Jack Turner is coming back, and when he comes back, he ain't coming back alone. You understand me? Yes, ma'am. Now sit down, I'm making coffee. Jack Turner came back that evening at dusk, and he did not come back alone. He came up the drive with 3 other riders. One was a man in a gray town suit and silver-rimmed spectacles riding a mule, who looked to Emily like he had never sat a saddle in his life, and was doing it anyway because he had to. That was Thomas Beck. Beside him rode a younger man with a deputy marshal's badge pinned to his vest, and beside the deputy marshal rode a woman, a woman on horseback in a divided riding skirt and a wide hat. And Mrs. Doyle, looking out the window, said one word under her breath. Jessup. Ma'am, Miss Ida Jessup, out of Phoenix, writes for the Arizona Republican. Jack rode 3 counties to get her. A newspaper woman. Child, the one thing a man like Cornelius Halston is more afraid of than a federal marshal is a woman with a printing press. Jack Turner knows his business. They came up on the porch. Jack Turner came through the door first, and he looked Emily up and down, and the relief on his face was a thing Emily would remember for the rest of her life, though she would never speak of it to him or anyone else. Miss Carter. Mr. Turner. You all right? Yes, sir. Mrs. Doyle treat you decent. Mrs. Doyle snorted. Decent. The child and me run off Halston in a forged writ yesterday morning, Jack, and you wasn't here for it. Jack Turner closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked at Thomas Beck. Tom. I heard her, Jack. Halston forged a writ of custody. He did. In the name of a sitting county judge. He did. Then we have him. The man in the gray suit came forward. He took off his hat. He knelt down in front of Emily the way Jack Turner had knelt at the foot of the porch steps 3 days before, and he looked at her with eyes that were kind and tired and very sharp. Miss Carter, my name is Thomas Beck. I used to be a prosecutor for the United States government. I am not a prosecutor anymore, but the man who replaced me is a personal friend of mine, and I have wired him, and he is on a train that will arrive in Prescott the day after tomorrow. Yes, sir. Miss Carter, I am going to ask you to do something very hard. Yes, sir. I am going to ask you to stand up in a courtroom in 3 days' time and tell 12 men exactly what you have told Mr. Turner. I am going to ask you to show them your father's book. I am going to ask you to name names, and I will tell you, child, that they will try to break you. They will say you are lying. They will say you are sick in the mind. They will say your father was a drunk and your book is a fairy tale. They will say whatever they have to say to save themselves. Do you understand? Emily Carter looked at the man on one knee in Mrs. Doyle's front room. She looked at Jack Turner standing behind him. She looked at the old widow with the shotgun by the door, and the newspaper woman in the wide hat, and the deputy marshal with his badge catching the lamplight. She put her hand against the notebook under her dress. Mr. Beck, sir. Yes, Miss Carter. They've been trying to break me for 3 months. They killed my papa. They took my shoes. They put me on a desert road to die. They come up on Mrs. Doyle's porch with a forged writ to drag me off, and I was in her cellar with a pistol in my lap, and I heard 'em try, and I heard her send 'em runnin'. They have tried every single thing they know how to try, sir. Yes, Miss Carter. And I am still here. Thomas Beck did not answer her for a long moment. Then he reached out very carefully, and he took her small scarred hand in both of his, and he bowed his head over it the way a man bows his head in church. Miss Emily Rose Carter, he said quietly, I will see you in that courtroom. Yes, sir. I will see you there. Yes, sir. You will. Outside Mrs. Doyle's window, the last red light of the day went down behind the ridgeline, and somewhere in Prescott, a man named Cornelius Halston sat down at a desk with a glass of whiskey and a telegram in his hand, and his hand was not quite steady, and he understood for the first time in a 15-year career of making children disappear from the law and women disappear from land deeds and witnesses disappear from courtrooms. 3 days later, Emily Carter walked into the Yavapai County Courthouse in Prescott wearing a blue cotton dress that Mrs. Doyle had sewn for her in 2 nights without sleep, and shoes that Jack Turner had bought off the feet of a cobbler who had never sold boots off his own feet before and would tell the story for 30 years afterward. Her chestnut hair was braided. Her split lip had healed to a thin pink line. She carried the notebook in both hands in front of her like a hymnal. Jack Turner walked on her right. Thomas Beck walked on her left. Mrs. Hattie Doyle walked behind them with the 10-gauge in the crook of her arm, until a bailiff told her politely that firearms were not permitted inside the courtroom, and she surrendered it to him with the grim patience of a woman who had expected to be told exactly that. You mind that gun, son? Yes, ma'am. That is my late husband's gun. Yes, ma'am. If it is not on that table when I walk out of that courtroom, I will find you." "Yes, ma'am." The courtroom was full. Word had traveled the way word travels in a territory on horseback by telegraph woman to woman over back fences, and Miss Ida Jessup of the Arizona Republican had spent 3 days in Prescott asking questions of a kind that nobody had asked in Yavapai County in a long while, and the result was that the gallery of Judge Harlan Webb's courtroom. Judge Webb, not Judge Morris, because Judge Morris was still on a train east, was packed with ranchers and shopkeepers, and 2 ministers and 9 women in Sunday dresses, and a boy of 12 who had skipped his chores to be there, and every one of them was watching the little girl in the blue dress come down the aisle. Eleanor Carter was at the defense table. She wore black. She had been weeping or had arranged her face to look as though she had been, and she did not look at Emily when Emily passed. Beside her sat Cornelius Halston, and his face was smooth, and his hands were folded on a stack of papers, and only a man who had been watching him very closely would have noticed that the little finger of his left hand was tapping, tapping, tapping against the polished wood of the table. The man with the silver band on his left hand was not in the courtroom. He had been arrested at a boarding house on the edge of Prescott the evening before by a deputy United States Marshal named Hollis Green, who had ridden up from Phoenix with 2 men and a warrant that Thomas Beck had helped draft at 1 o'clock in the morning by the light of a kerosene lamp in Mrs. Doyle's kitchen. His real name, it turned out, was Silas Creed. He had indeed killed 4 men. He had also, it further turned out, killed a 5th Samuel Carter of Prescott, Arizona, in the spring of the current year by means of a spooked horse and a rigged saddle cinch. Silas Creed had not said any of this. Silas Creed was not a talker. But his saddlebag had been searched, and inside the saddlebag had been a letter from Cornelius Halston dated the 9th of July containing the phrase, "The girl must not reach Turner." And Thomas Beck had laid that letter on the judge's bench the moment court was called to order. Judge Harlan Webb was a thin man in his 60s with a white beard and eyes like 2 chips of agate. He read the letter. He read it again. He set it down. "Mr. Halston." "Your Honor." "Stand up, please, sir." Halston stood. "Mr. Halston, is this your handwriting?" "Your Honor, I must object to." "I did not ask you to object, sir. I asked you if this is your handwriting." I would need to examine the document at greater—" "I will take that as a yes, Mr. Halston. Sit down." Halston sat. His little finger tapped faster. Thomas Beck rose. He walked to the center of the courtroom. He did not raise his voice. He had never raised his voice in a courtroom in 30 years of practice, and he had put more men in prison than any prosecutor in the history of the territory. "Your Honor, the territory calls Emily Rose Carter." There was a movement in the gallery, 100 people leaning forward at once. Emily stood up from the bench behind the prosecution table. She did not look at Jack Turner. She had learned in 3 days of being taught by Thomas Beck that a witness who looked at the people she loved during testimony could be broken by a good defense lawyer in about 10 minutes, and she did not intend to be broken. She walked to the witness box. The bailiff held the door for her. She stepped up. She laid her right hand on the Bible he held out to her. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do, sir." "Be seated." She sat. Her feet did not reach the floor of the witness box. She did not swing them. She folded her small hands in her lap on top of her father's notebook, and she looked at Thomas Beck, and she waited. "Miss Carter?" "Mr. Beck." "State your name for the court, please." "Emily Rose Carter." "Your age, Miss Carter?" 10 years old, sir. 11 in October." "And who was your father, Miss Carter?" "Samuel Jefferson Carter, of Prescott." "Is your father living, Miss Carter?" "No, sir." "When did he pass?" "April the 19th of this year, sir." "And how did he pass?" "He was murdered, sir." The courtroom did not gasp. The courtroom went silent, in the particular way that a courtroom goes silent when a 10-year-old child speaks the word murdered without her voice shaking. Halston's little finger stopped tapping. Eleanor Carter's handkerchief, which had been pressed to the corner of her eye for the better part of an hour, came down into her lap. "Miss Carter, that is a serious word." "Yes, sir, it is." Can you tell the court how you know your father was murdered? Yes, sir. Because he told me he was going to be. Someone in the gallery made a small sound. The judge did not look up. He told you, Miss Carter? Yes, sir. 3 nights before he died. He called me into his study and he sat me down and he said, Emmy, there is men after me, and I do not think I am going to get out of this one. And he said there is a notebook in my desk, and I have been writing things in it for 8 months. And when I am gone, you are to take it, and you are not to give it to anybody but Jack Turner out at the old Holloway place. And he taught me his code, and he made me say it back till I had it. Miss Carter, do you have that notebook with you today? Yes, sir, I do. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? You may. Thomas Beck approached. Emily lifted the notebook in both hands. He took it. He walked to the judge's bench. He laid it in front of Judge Webb. Your Honor, the Territory submits this notebook in the hand of the late Samuel Jefferson Carter into evidence as Exhibit A. So entered. Your Honor, if it please the court, I will ask Miss Carter to read aloud 3 entries from the notebook, which she can do because her father taught her to read his shorthand. Halston shot to his feet. Your Honor, I object. The child is 10 years old. Any claim that she can read her late father's private cipher is preposterous on its face. This is theater, Your Honor, not evidence, and I move that. Mr. Halston. Your Honor. Sit down. But Your Honor. Sit down. Mr. Halston. Halston sat. The judge looked at Emily. Young lady. Yes, Your Honor. Counsel for the defense believes you cannot read that book. What do you say to that? Emily looked at Cornelius Halston. She looked at him the way she had looked at the man on the bay horse on the freight road when she had lain in the mesquite and memorized every inch of him. She did not smile. She did not glare. She simply looked. I say, Your Honor, that Mr. Halston would prefer I couldn't. The gallery did not laugh. It was too quiet to laugh. But something moved through the room, a shifting of weight, a drawing of breath, and Judge Harlan Webb's white beard moved in a way that in another man would have been a smile. Read the book, child. Thomas Beck brought the notebook back to her. She opened it. She turned to a page that she and Beck had marked with a sliver of paper 3 days before at Mrs. Doyle's kitchen table at 1 in the morning. She read, October the 14th, 1891. Followed Sheriff Boone from Halston's office to the First Territorial Bank. He carried a brown envelope when he went in. He did not have it when he come out. Went in after. Asked Miss Hensley at the counter if a deposit had been made. She said yes. $200 cash to the account of Thaddeus Boone. I thanked her and left. She turned a page. December the 2nd. Eleanor asked at supper about the south parcel, the one by the creek, asked how much it was worth. I did not answer. She said Mr. Halston had asked her. I said I did not sell land to Mr. Halston or to any man he sent. She did not speak to me for 3 days. She turned a page. March the 11th. Eleanor in town all day. Came home with a new silk bonnet. I have not given her money for a silk bonnet. Checked the strong box in the barn. $40 missing. She is taking money from somewhere else. Or from someone else. She closed the book. There is more, Your Honor. I can read more. Judge Webb very quietly said, I believe the court has heard sufficient, Miss Carter. Halston was on his feet again. Your Honor, this proves nothing. A dead man's notebook read by his own daughter cannot possibly. Thomas Beck turned. Your Honor, at this time the Territory calls Mr. Jacob Holloway, former teller of the First Territorial Bank of Prescott. The gallery turned as one. A small white-haired man at the back of the courtroom stood up. He had been sitting there the whole morning, and nobody had noticed him. He walked down the aisle with a sheaf of papers in his hand, and he was sworn in, and he sat and he answered Thomas Beck's questions in a dry clerk's voice for the next 20 minutes, and by the end of those 20 minutes, the courtroom had learned 3 things. It had learned that Sheriff Thaddeus Boone had received over the course of the previous 18 months the sum of $3,400 in cash deposits from an account controlled by the law office of Cornelius P. Halston. It had learned that Eleanor Carter, beginning the week before her marriage to Samuel Carter, had received 11 separate deposits from the same account, totaling $870. And it had learned that 2 days after Samuel Carter's death, an additional $500 had been deposited to Eleanor Carter's account, with a notation in Halston's own hand, reading simply, "Final." Eleanor Carter made a sound at the defense table. It was not a sob. It was the sound a woman makes when the floor has gone out from under her. "Your Honor," said Thomas Beck. The territory further calls Deputy Marshal Hollis Green of the United States Marshal Service Phoenix office, who will testify to the arrest yesterday evening of one, Silas Creed, alias John Harmon, alias Samuel Pike, at the Dunbar boarding house in Prescott, and to the contents of Mr. Creed's saddlebag, including a letter in the hand of Cornelius Halston, dated July 9th of this year. "Call him," said the judge. Halston rose one more time. Your Honor, if I may. Before further testimony is heard, I wish to request a recess for the defense to..." "Denied." "Your Honor, I must insist." "Mr. Halston." "Your Honor." "You insist on nothing in my courtroom. Sit down, sir, or I will have the bailiff sit you down." Halston sat. Deputy Marshal Hollis Green was sworn. He was a big man, slow-spoken, with a mustache the color of iron. He laid Silas Creed's letter on the bench, and he laid beside it a second document, a signed statement taken that morning in a cell in which Silas Creed, in exchange for the removal of the possibility of a hanging, had named Cornelius Halston as the man who had paid him $200 in April to kill Samuel Carter, and had named Eleanor Carter as the woman who had held Samuel Carter's coffee long enough for a tincture of laudanum to be stirred into it on the morning of his final ride. The horse had not been spooked by accident. Samuel Carter had been half asleep in the saddle before the cinch ever gave way. Eleanor Carter began to weep. This time, the weeping was not for the gallery. This time, it came up out of her, the way water comes up out of a well, and she put her face in her hands and she said over and over, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." Emily in the witness box did not look at her. Thomas Beck turned one last time. Your Honor, the territory rests. Judge Harlan Webb sat for a long moment. Then he leaned forward on his elbows, and he looked down the length of the courtroom, and he spoke the way a man speaks who has been waiting all his life to say what he is about to say. Mr. Halston, Mrs. Carter, stand please. They stood. Halston did not look up from the table. Eleanor Carter was still weeping. Cornelius P. Halston. By the authority vested in me by the Territory of Arizona and the United States of America, I am remanding you to the custody of Deputy Marshal Green, pending formal arraignment on charges to include conspiracy to commit murder, forgery of a judicial order, bribery of a peace officer, and fraud. Bail is denied. Do you understand, sir? Halston said nothing. Do you understand, sir? I understand. Eleanor Beaumont Carter, you are likewise remanded on charges of conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, and grand theft. Bail is denied. Do you understand? Eleanor could not speak. She nodded. Sheriff Thaddeus Boone is as of this moment suspended from duty pending investigation. Deputy Marshal Green, I would ask that you find him before sundown. Yes, Your Honor. Miss Carter? Emily in the witness box lifted her head. Yes, Your Honor. The court has one further matter before it, child, and I will not make you wait on it. Mr. Beck has filed a petition with this court for the termination of Eleanor Carter's guardianship over your person and the transfer of that guardianship to Mr. Jack Turner of the Turner Ranch, subject to the consent of the minor child. Yes, sir. Miss Carter, do you consent? Emily Carter sat in the witness box with her small hands folded on her father's empty notebook, and she did not look at Jack Turner because she had promised Thomas Beck she would not, and she kept her word to men who kept their word to her. She looked at the judge. Your Honor, sir. Yes, child. I walked 20 miles of desert to find that man. I reckon I consent. Judge Harlan Webb's white beard moved again, and this time it was a smile, and he did not try to hide it. Granted. The gavel came down. The courtroom erupted. Not in shouting, the gallery was still full of ranchers and women in Sunday dresses, and they did not shout, but in a long, low murmuring rush, the sound a river makes when the ice breaks on it in spring. Miss Ida Jessup of the Arizona Republican was already writing. Mrs. Hattie Doyle was standing by the back wall with her arms crossed and her lips pressed tight and her old eyes wet. Thomas Beck had sat down at the prosecution table and was very quietly taking off his spectacles and pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes. And Jack Turner, who had not moved from his seat in the front row of the gallery through 3 hours of testimony because Emily had asked him before they came into the courtroom not to, because she had needed to do this one thing on her own legs. Jack Turner stood up. He did not come forward. He waited. Emily climbed down out of the witness box. The bailiff offered her his hand. She did not take it. She walked across the courtroom on her own, past the table where Eleanor Carter sat weeping into her cuffed hands, past Cornelius Halston, who had not lifted his eyes, past Thomas Beck, who was still pressing his hands against his face. She walked to the railing that separated the lawyers from the gallery. She stopped. She looked up at Jack Turner. "Mr. Turner?" "Miss Carter, I am ready to go home now, sir." Jack Turner had to take one full breath before he could answer her. When he did, his voice was steady. "Yes, ma'am, let's go home." He held out his hand. She took it. And together, past 100 quiet strangers who stood as they passed, stood without being told the way a congregation stands. Jack Turner and Emily Rose Carter walked out of the Yavapai County Courthouse and into the high blue light of an Arizona afternoon. And the law, for once in the long red history of that country, walked out with them. The ride home from Prescott was 34 miles, and Jack Turner made it in 2 days because Emily Carter fell asleep in the saddle in front of him an hour out of town and did not wake for 11 hours. He did not ride hard. He did not ride at all for the first stretch of it. He walked the horse, one hand on the reins, and the other laid flat across the child's shoulder blades to hold her steady against his chest, and Mrs. Hattie Doyle rode beside him on her old gray mare, and did not speak because there was nothing that needed speaking. They stopped the first night at a line camp on the edge of the Turner Range. Jack lifted Emily down. She mumbled something he did not catch. He laid her on a bedroll by the fire, and Mrs. Doyle put her own wool coat over the girl, and the two of them sat across the fire from each other and drank coffee and said nothing for the better part of an hour. Finally, Mrs. Doyle spoke. "Jack? Hattie? You ever raise a girl?" "No, ma'am." "You scared?" "Terrified." Mrs. Doyle nodded once. "Good. A man who ain't scared of raising a girl has no business raising one. That your advice?" "That's my advice." "Anything else?" "Yes, you let her cry when she's ready to cry. She ain't cried yet, Jack, not once. Not when they dumped her on that road, not when she walked up your drive, not when she sat in my cellar, not when she took the stand. That child is holding something inside of her the size of the Arizona Territory, and when it comes out, it is going to come out all at once, and when it does, you are going to hold her, and you are not going to tell her to hush. And you are not going to tell her it's going to be all right because she is 10 years old and she already knows that a lot of things ain't all right. You just hold her. You hear me?" "I hear you." "You got anything to ask me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Ask." "What do I call her?" Mrs. Doyle looked at him over the fire. "Jack." "Hattie." "You call her Emily. You call her Miss Carter when she needs standing up for. You do not call her daughter, and you do not call her child, and you do not call her anything she has not given you leave to call her. She will tell you what she is to you, and you will wait. You understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Emily did not cry that night. She did not cry the next morning. She did not cry when they rode up to the Turner place at noon on the second day, and Jack lifted her down from the saddle in the yard, where she had first stood 3 weeks before, with her bleeding feet wrapped in rags. She looked up at the house. She looked up at him. "Mr. Turner." "Miss Carter." "Where do I sleep?" "There's a room at the back, ma'am. Used to be my boy's. Ain't been used in 5 years. Mrs. Doyle aired it out last week." "Caleb's room." Jack's breath stopped. "Yes, ma'am." "Is that all right with you, sir?" Jack Turner had to look away from her for a moment. He looked at the horizon, at the fence line she had come through the first day at anything. When he looked back, his eyes were clear. "It is Miss Carter. It is more all right with me than you know." "Thank you, sir." She walked up the porch steps by herself. She did not limp. Her feet had healed. The first week was quiet. Jack Turner did not know how to talk to a 10-year-old girl, and he did not pretend otherwise. He did the work he had always done. He rode the fence lines in the morning. He doctored a calf with scours. He mended a stretch of rail. He came in at noon to find that Emily had, without being asked, washed the breakfast dishes and stacked them on the shelf in a way that suggested she had been washing dishes for somebody since she was 5. He came in at supper to find that she had kneaded bread. He did not ask her how she had learned. Samuel Carter's widow had not, he suspected, been the kind of stepmother who hired help. On the 4th night she spoke at supper for the first time without being spoken to. "Mr. Turner?" "Miss Carter." "Was Caleb a good boy?" Jack Turner set down his fork. He chewed slowly. He swallowed. "He was." "What was he like?" He was a serious boy, Miss Carter. He was quiet. He thought about things. He asked questions a grown man couldn't answer. He loved his mother. He loved his horse. His horse was a little paint mare named Biscuit. When he died, Biscuit stood at the pasture fence for a week and would not eat. We had to sell her to a family down by Sedona. She lived to be 22. They wrote me when she passed. "You kept the letter." "I kept the letter." "Can I see it sometime?" "You can see it any time you want, Miss Carter." She nodded. She went back to her supper. After a long moment, she said very quietly, "My papa had a horse named Dutch. Big gray gelding. 15 years old. He was the one that—" She stopped. Jack Turner set his fork down again. "Emily." "Sir." "You don't have to finish that sentence." "I want to, sir." "All right. He was the horse they used to kill my papa. And Dutch didn't do it, Mr. Turner. Dutch never did it. They drugged my papa, and they cut the cinch, and they laid it on Dutch, and everybody in the county said it was the horse. And they shot Dutch 2 days later behind the barn, because Eleanor said he was dangerous. And he wasn't, sir. He wasn't never dangerous. He was a good horse. And they shot him for something he didn't do." "Emily." "Sir." "Come here, please, ma'am." She got up from her chair. She walked around the table. She stopped 2 feet from him. He did not reach for her. He did not pull her in. Mrs. Hattie Doyle's voice was in his head. "She will tell you what she is to you." And so he only opened his arms very slightly, and he waited. Emily Carter stood in his kitchen for a long moment, and then she walked into his arms, and she laid her forehead against his shoulder, and she cried. She cried for her father. She cried for Dutch. She cried for the shoes Eleanor had pulled off her feet. She cried for the 20 miles of desert road. She cried for the man in the dark coat who had called her sweetheart. She cried for the night in Mrs. Doyle's cellar with a pistol in her lap. She cried for the blue dress and the courtroom and the weight of her father's notebook against her heart for 3 months and 20 miles. She cried the way Mrs. Doyle had said she would cry, all at once the size of the Arizona Territory, her whole body shaking with it. And Jack Turner did exactly what Mrs. Doyle had told him to do, which was to hold her, and to not tell her to hush, and to not tell her it was going to be all right. He held her until she was done. He did not know how long that was. When she finally stepped back, she wiped her face with the back of her wrist, the way she had wiped it on the freight road the day Eleanor had driven away. "I'm sorry, sir." "Don't be sorry, Miss Carter. I wet your shirt. Shirt'll dry." She almost laughed. She did not quite. "Mr. Turner." "Ma'am, is it all right if I go to bed now?" "It is more than all right, ma'am." She went. He sat at the table alone for a long time afterward. He did not eat. When he finally got up, he went out on the porch and stood in the dark, and he said one word very quietly to the sky. "Sam." He did not say anything else. He did not need to. The weeks turned into a month, and the month turned into 2. Miss Ida Jessup's story ran on the front page of the Arizona Republican on the 30th of July, under the headline, The Girl Who Walked 20 Miles, and it was reprinted in 4 papers back east by the end of August. And a woman in Boston sent Emily a doll with a porcelain face, and a schoolteacher in St. Louis sent a Bible with her name engraved on the cover, and the Turner Ranch received 42 pieces of mail in a single week before Jack Turner put a stop to the whole business by quietly asking Miss Jessup to print a follow-up note, stating that the child would accept no further gifts and would like to be left to grow up in peace. The mail slowed. It never quite stopped. Cornelius Halston was tried in federal court in Phoenix in September. He was convicted on all counts. He was sentenced to 30 years. Eleanor Carter pled guilty in exchange for 20. Sheriff Thaddeus Boone was tried in October and received 12. Silas Creed was hanged in November. The Carter Ranch, which Halston and Eleanor had been working in, forged increments to transfer to a shell company controlled by a silent partner in San Francisco, was restored to its rightful owner. That owner was a 10-year-old girl in Yavapai County who held the deed in a tin box under her bed in what had once been Caleb Turner's room, and who had, through Thomas Beck, as her legal guardian's counsel, already arranged to lease the property to a neighbor she trusted for 10 years at fair market rate, with the understanding that she did not intend to live there and did not intend for the foreseeable future to sell. "Why not sell it, Miss Carter?" Thomas Beck had asked her once at the kitchen table, pen in hand, lease agreement between them. "Because, Mr. Beck, sir, my papa worked that land for 20 years, and it is not mine to sell." "Then whose is it, child?" "It is my papa's, sir. I am just holding it for him." Thomas Beck had signed the lease without asking another question. And so the autumn came in. The summer heat broke. The first cold winds came down off the rim. Emily Carter, who had arrived at the Turner Ranch in a torn gray dress with her feet wrapped in rags, was walking around the yard in October in a pair of new boots and a wool coat and a hat that Mrs. Hattie Doyle had shaped for her on a block in the widow's kitchen, and she was riding a sorrel pony named Pepper that Jack Turner had bought off a neighbor for $30, because the pony had a steady head and a good mouth and a patient way about it. She still called him Mr. Turner. He still called her Miss Carter. Mrs. Doyle came by one Saturday in late October with a basket of biscuits and a pie, and she sat on the porch with Jack while Emily was down at the corral brushing Pepper, and she looked at Jack over the rim of her coffee cup, and she said, "Jack Turner." "Hattie, you are a fool." "Yes, ma'am." "You do not even want to know why I am calling you a fool." "I expect you will tell me." "I will. You are a fool because that child out there has been calling you Mr. Turner for 3 months and she is waiting." "Waiting for what?" "Waiting for you to tell her she don't have to." Jack Turner looked down into his cup. "Hattie." "Jack." "I am scared to." "I know you are." "What if she don't want to?" "Then she will tell you and you will go on being Mr. Turner and no harm done." "What if I tell her and it ain't what she needs to hear?" "Jack, look at me." He looked at her. "That child chose you. She chose you 20 miles before she ever laid eyes on you. She walked across a desert to choose you. You do not need to be scared of whether she wants you. You need to be scared of whether you are going to be worthy of her. And I have known you for 22 years. Jack Turner and I will tell you this one time, and then I will not tell you again. You are worthy." Jack Turner did not speak for a long time. "Hattie." "Jack." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Go tell the child." He did not tell the child that day. He did not tell her the next. He told her finally on the first true rain of the autumn, a cold afternoon rain that came in low off the rim and broke a drought that had held the valley for 7 weeks, when he found her standing in the yard in the middle of it, with her face turned up and her eyes closed and the rain running down her cheeks and her braid gone dark with the wet. "Miss Carter?" "Yes, sir." "You are standing in the rain, ma'am." "Yes, sir." "You are going to catch your death." "No, sir, I don't reckon I am." He walked down off the porch. He stopped a few feet from her. The rain came down on his hat and ran off the brim in a thin silver line. "Why you standing out here, child?" Emily opened her eyes. She looked at him. Her face was wet, and she was smiling a small smile he had not seen on her before. Because Mr. Turner. Because why Miss Carter? Because when Eleanor put me on that road, she said I wasn't ever going to see rain again. She said the desert was going to dry me up, and there wouldn't be enough of me left to bury. She wiped her face through the rain immediately wet it again. And I stood up and I walked, and I come here, and now it is rainin', sir, and I am standin' in it. And she was wrong. Jack Turner could not speak. He nodded. Mr. Turner. Yes, Emily. Can I ask you something? You can ask me anything. If I was to call you something different. Yes. Would that be all right with you, sir? Jack Turner took off his hat. He held it against his chest. Emily. Sir. I have been waiting 4 months for you to ask me that. Her small mouth trembled. Her chin did not. She looked up at him through the rain, and the last piece of the child who had been dropped on a freight road in July lifted away from her like a thing the rain was washing off, and when she spoke it was in a voice he had not heard her use before. A voice that was not a 10-year-old's and not a grown woman's, but something all her own, something she had earned on 20 miles of blistered road and in a widow's cellar and in a witness box in front of 100 strangers. Dad? Jack Turner closed his eyes. He opened them. He knelt down in the mud in front of her, the way he had knelt at the foot of his porch steps the day she had walked up his drive, and he put his arms around her, and she put her arms around him, and the cold rain came down on both of them, and neither one of them moved. Yes, Emily. Yes, sir. Yes, daughter. Yes, Dad. When they finally walked up the porch together, he did not let go of her hand, and she did not ask him to. Mrs. Doyle, who had ridden over unannounced that morning, and had been watching the whole business through the kitchen window with a dish towel pressed against her mouth, turned away from the window and wiped her eyes very quickly with the back of her wrist, and was stirring a pot on the stove with every appearance of a woman who had seen nothing at all by the time the door opened. You two are soaked. Yes, ma'am, said Jack. Yes, ma'am, said Emily. Get out of them wet clothes, both of you. Supper is in 10 minutes and I will not be serving it to the drowned. Yes, ma'am, said Emily. She went down the hall to Caleb's room, to her room now, and it had been her room for a long time, though she had not yet thought of it that way, and she shut the door, and she changed into dry clothes. When she came back out, she was wearing the blue cotton dress Mrs. Doyle had sewn her for the courtroom, because it was the nicest thing she owned, and she did not entirely know why she had put it on, except that tonight felt like a night for the nicest thing. She sat down at the table. Jack Turner sat across from her in a dry shirt. Mrs. Doyle set the pot between them. She served Emily first. They ate. Afterward, when the dishes had been cleared and the rain had settled into a steady low drum on the tin roof, Jack Turner walked out onto the porch with a cup of coffee, and he stood at the railing and he looked out into the dark toward the gate she had walked through 4 months before. Emily came out after him. She stood beside him. She did not speak for a long time. When she spoke, it was very quietly. Dad? Yes, daughter. I ain't scared no more. He did not look down at her. He kept looking at the gate. No, Emily. Not of nothing. No. Not of Eleanor. Not of Halston. Not of the man on the bay horse. Not of the desert. Not of the rain. Not of nothing. No baby. You know why. Tell me why. Emily Carter looked up at the man standing beside her, at the quiet, withdrawn, dark-haired cowboy who had once knelt in the dust at the foot of his porch steps and looked at a bleeding child, and understood in one long look what she was asking of him and what it was going to cost him to say yes. She slipped her hand into his. Because I am home. Jack Turner's hand closed around hers. The rain came down on the tin roof of the Turner place, and on the long, empty Arizona road that ran past its gate, and somewhere in Phoenix, a man in a cell was lying awake in the dark. And somewhere in the Yavapai County Jail, a woman in black was sitting on the edge of a cot with her head in her hands, and somewhere in a small pine box behind a ranch house, 12 miles south of Prescott, a good gray gelding named Dutch lay at rest under an unmarked stone that a 10-year-old girl would set there with her own hands before the first snow, and none of it could touch her anymore. Not 1 inch of it. Not 1 day of it. Not ever again. Emily Rose Carter had walked 20 miles across the burning desert to find the only man her father ever said she could trust. And she had found him, and she had chosen him, and she had given him back a word he thought he would never hear again in this life. And on the porch of the Turner Ranch, in the clean, cold rain of an Arizona autumn, with her hand in the hand of the man she had crossed a desert to reach a child who had once been thrown from a wagon to die, stood warm and dry and safe and home. And she was never going to walk that road again.